Hello everyone, I'm Ryan from 2 Car Pros, and today we're going to be taking a look at how to replace the rear struts for a 2002 Ford F-150. This is a pretty simple and straightforward repair that anybody could really do in a garage type situation. But before we get started, the replacement shocks we use were kind of cheapy aftermarket ones. I don't recommend using them. I can only recommend using Ford Motorcraft parts for your Ford vehicle. And make sure you get the correct length rear shocks. That seems to be a little bit of an issue to find. So you can do what we did and take the shock off, take it to the auto parts store and physically hold them next to them or measure them out. You can order them online that way as well. Or you can use Rock Auto. They have a great parts checker on as far as exactly what your truck would need. I think you can type in the VIN and do it that way. You can also go through Amazon. They're another awesome parts checking service, and there's free returns with Amazon. Who doesn't like that? So with all that out of the way, let's just go ahead and jump into it. I'm going to start the video up already jacked up in the air. If you're confused on how to jack up your vehicle, I have a great video up here located in the card and down below the description. And with all that out of the way, we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, what we're going to do is spray some WD-40 here on this bolt that holds the bottom end of the shock to that clevis. Wait a little bit, and now we're going to grab an 18mm wrench, and I have an 18mm impact driver, so I'm going to use that. The nut and the bolt are both 18mm. There we go. And just like that, the lower shock absorber is free. So here's where we're working today on the back of this 2002 F-150. We are removing the shock absorber here. I've already removed the wheel. You should definitely know how to do that if you're attempting this repair. And this repair is fairly simple, so I will be working back there. I just want to show you that before I get started. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is squirt that nut there with some WD-40 on the threads like that, and we're going to let it sit for about 10 minutes. Alright, so this is the nut in question we're looking at. It is an 18mm, and we're just going to take that off now that the WD-40 has set on there for a little bit. Alright, so on the bottom side of the mount, there is a nut that you're going to need to get an 18mm wrench on while you are loosening the nut up top. There we go. And then make sure to remove the top nut and bushing there, because our new ones come with new nuts and new bushings, so that's going to go in the trash. Now we can replace our shock here, and we're going to leave this protecting wrapper on, so that way the shock doesn't extend while we're working. So what we're going to do is tighten this up a little bit, not fully tight though. We just want to make sure it's not going to fall off or shift. Because if you tighten it too tight, this won't be able to articulate while we're trying to get the top mount bolted on. We can come back to this later and fully bolt it in place. Alright, so here is our new shock absorber here. Now, the reason it has this protective strap over it is to make sure that it is not extended while shipping, and so when you get to this part, it's a little easier to cut off. However, I think this shock is like a teeny bit on the short side. It is a off-brand, which I do not recommend. I only can recommend using Ford Motorcraft parts. So we can cut this off here, and immediately, as soon as we get the strap off, it's going to want to extend, so we want to get that protector off there. So before it extends too far, we want to get that washer and rubber piece on there, and then it can go into that slot. Now, it's still not seated totally perfectly, so what we're going to do is lower the truck down, put a jack underneath the rear end, and the rear end down that way, and that will lift up the rear end so we can get a nut on it on the top side. But it should look like this, and it might look a little bit different. It might look exactly the way the stock one was, but again, this is an aftermarket part, so it's going to look a teeny bit different. So if you bought the stock one, it's going to look stock. So the next thing I'm going to do is put my jack under the rear end of this truck here, and we're going to jack it up to get the shock into a better spot to where we can get a nut on the top mount. Now the stud is poking through enough to where we can get the bushing and nut on, because it needs to go on like this. We have the rubber part here, a washer, and the top here. Again, if you bought the Motorcraft ones, you might not have to deal with this. This is only because it is an aftermarket part. But okay, you can let the jack down. All right, and we're gonna finish tightening up this bolt here because the top of the shock is in its home. So that is how to replace the rear shock for your Ford F-150 from 2002, anywhere in that year range. In the title, this is something anybody could do, like I said in the beginning of the video, in a garage type situation. I only showed doing the driver's side shock because the passenger side is exactly the same. It's just on the other side of the truck, but it is in fact the same. On that cheapy shock, it didn't have a lower bushing nut, so you had to kind of hold the top of the shock absorber so the spindle and the stud wouldn't turn while you're trying to torque down the top nut there. Like I said, I would definitely recommend using the Ford Motorcraft replacement for your Ford vehicle. So just buy the OEM replacement shock for your truck and make sure it's the correct length. Other than that, this is really simple and straightforward. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoy this type of content, make sure you're subscribed and you ring the notification bell. And if you leave a like, that really helps me out. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.